On the count of five, four, three, two, one. Hello and welcome to my first million dot live, a new podcast series where I talk to first-time millionaires and learn the stories on their journey to make their first $1 million and above by delivering massive value to the world. The idea behind starting this series came from two quotes that I came across. First is from Jim Rohn, who said, set a goal to become a millionaire for what it makes of you to achieve it. Do it for the skills you have to learn and the person you have to become. And the second quote is earning your first $1 million is hard. Your second $1 million is inevitable. Let's ask our guest if he believes in this. But before that, let me introduce him. I'm thrilled to have with me ANIL ADVANI, the founder and managing partner of Inventus Law, a global technology firm that represents high growth startup companies, founders, angel investors, incubators, accelerators, and venture capital and private equity investors. Over the last 19 years, working at powerhouse law firms like Cooley Godward and Oric Harrington, and now Inventus Law, Anil has represented over 3,000 startups, angels, and founders, and have been involved in almost 500 financing and mergers and acquisition transactions valued at over 3 billion in the aggregate. He has made over 25 angel investments in companies across the spectrum, from healthcare, financial services to software and SaaS ventures. He is also the founding member of US-India Strategic Partnership Forum, Chief Strategy Officer at Shift Mobility, founding member of Accelerate that connects startups to global 5,000 corporations for scaling revenue. With that, let's talk to Anil. Hello, Anil. How are you doing today?
Hi, Ravi. Good to be here. How are you?
Great, Anil. Lovely backdrop there. We were just talking, so I think this is the first time I'm talking to a guest who is doing it from such lovely backdrop. My first question to you is: I just went through your excellent career record, phenomenal rise in personal success, and I know for sure you come from humble background, but you have risen through the ranks and having a significant impact to the world. We would like to know your life story, because that is very inspiring, and I haven't heard. I looked through all your public speaking engagements, but I've never come across your life story. So maybe that would be a great context setter for us to know how did your life shape up over the years?
Sure. One of the reasons you haven't heard about my life story is because there's really not much to talk about that would inspire people, in terms of the humble backgrounds that you referred to. My parents came from humble backgrounds, both immigrated from Pakistan as part of the partition, so with literally nothing, and came into India and sort of worked through their hard work. Both my parents worked through their lives, and through their hard work built really a good platform for my sister and I. So I guess fortunately or unfortunately, I can't say like other immigrants say that I came into this country with $10 in my pocket. My parents actually funded my education, Master of Laws at Georgetown. So it was really set up very nicely by my parents. Therefore, I don't have much to talk about my early struggles. But then, as everybody else that comes to the US thinking it's an easy sort of place to just come plug in and become successful, we realize otherwise, that it requires a lot of hard work, passion, all the good things that you need in any place to be successful. And anyone that's successful in the US, I would claim, actually can be successful in India at this stage. It's again, people assume that if you're successful, all you have to do is land up in the US and everyone's waiting with like money for you and jobs for you and opportunities for you. It's not the case, as we know. People who've been there, done that. Yes, I mean, some people struggle more because, as I said, some they come with like literally very little and they have to work towards it. My education was really funded by my dad's provident fund at that time. So I was very fortunate in that respect. But once you land in the US, you are starting from scratch, right? So that's the struggle that we talk about, or should talk about. And a lot of learning from other entrepreneurs that are thinking about making the move in the US, India, or even anywhere else, even from Delhi to Bangalore, Bangalore to Hyderabad, wherever you would be moving for business or work opportunities, you are starting from scratch in many respects, right? Building your network, friends, understanding how things work. trusting someone to actually hire you over someone local that they know already in their network. All of those are real challenges that you work with or you deal with, on an everyday life as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, so maybe a bit of background on how did it all begin
Sure.
in the US? Did you have set goals for your life, or did one thing turn to another? What were your early life goals, and or did your life goals change with every little goal that you achieved?
Yeah, I mean, as you grow, right? I mean, your goals change. You put yourself under a bigger scanner. You become more ambitious. You learn that and get confidence in your own ability. So they do change. In college, I actually started working, and my goal was to be able to pay for my, motorcycle petrol in my motorcycle, my Marlboro lights, and a beer at the end of the day. That if I could do that, I thought I was successful in college. And obviously, that goal changed to, in some respects, a very loose definition of I want to be successful, after college. But I wasn't going to be an engineer. I was going to be a doctor for various reasons. So I was the only other profession I thought that could, make me successful was becoming a lawyer. So that's how I stumbled upon becoming a lawyer. Not really a deep plan of, a vision for next 20 years, as I should have had, I guess, on hindsight. But I tell my daughter that as well, right? And any kids that are going through their next, college and onwards planning, Steve Jobs said it best, right? You have to connect the dots backwards. And there's so many things that will happen between where you are in college to the rest of your life that you should plan, you should work towards a plan, but be open to a lot of other opportunities that will open up, right? So that's what happened with me. I went into law because, as I said, it was a loose definition of wanting to become successful. Practice in India for a few years. Decided that that wasn't really in India at that time. To be a successful lawyer, the only way you could do that was to become a criminal lawyer, get a lot of money from people, go and bribe judges. And I'm not saying it frivolously. This is something that at that time at least happened very frequently and openly. And the successful lawyers were the ones that did that, right? And got their clients sort of acquitted for with the various ways of doing that. And I saw that that wasn't the life for me, but I still wanted to be successful. So I came into the US with, again, not a very clear plan on what that would mean, except knowing that if I came to the US, got my master's in law, when I went back to India, that would be valuable, and I could either start something on my own or work at a big firm and at least start getting paid a lot more money. Once I came in, and again, the plan was that typically as you come in for studies in the US, you have 1 year of practical training or optional practical training, which is really your way of earning in the US to be able to make up for all the cost of education in the US. But that's where sort of somewhat of a tragedy stuck, because we had my ex-wife and I had actually come together. We were both lawyers in India, became law students at Georgetown. The week that we graduated, August 2017, or not 2007, is when India sort of tested the nuclear device in Pokhran. And there was a complete freeze. And this probably before your time, Ravi, but it was a complete freeze on any transactions to do with India. So when we walked around knocking on doors and saying to law firms, "Hey, hire me. I'm this lawyer from India, and I'd like to work for you for this 1 year to make some money," they would literally say, "Shoo, go away, because we're not hiring. Our clients are not allowed to do transactions in India. We're not looking for any lawyer with that background." So here we were, having spent all of my parents, provident fund, my ex-wife, her parents put in obviously a lot of their savings into getting us law degrees, and with the plan that we'd work in the US and start to earn some money back, and with no prospects of earning in the US. So we struggled through that, and we actually had times where we would go to McDonald's and figure out whether we should take the whole meal or just buy the fries, literally, at that point, because we just put that pressure on ourselves. So we literally had to do that, negotiate and say, okay, maybe I'll eat the fries, you eat this, so just eat rice all the time, and rice and sambar curry, the cheapest form of, survival at that time. So those were hard times. But again, we got very fortunate in the sense that, one second, sorry. We got very fortunate. I mean, I guess I hustled a lot. I got an internship at the FCC, which was very unusual because, again, at the FCC, no one knew that I was actually a foreign lawyer, not a US lawyer. But somehow they cleared me, and I got referred from my professor at that time, who was the chairman of the FCC International Bureau at that time. I got into the FCC. Through that, I got introduced to other lawyers, and one of the partners decided, hire me. and I joined Freshfields, which was this mega global law firm, British law firm, Magic Circle firm in Washington D.C. So I joined their Washington D.C. office, and that was like the dream come true, right? I had an office overlooking the White House. I had my own secretary, working for a mega firm. In that time, working on $1 billion, where $1 billion was a lot of money. No one had heard about, how to sort of structure $1 billion deals. But I started working on $1 billion transaction in Philippines. We were going to cut off a mountaintop to build a mine, in Philippines. Not we, but our clients. So, as exciting as a corporate lawyer, as exciting as they come in terms of, obviously, there were environmental issues that as a young, kid from India, I didn't care about at that time. But that was exciting. I got in there, and then during the course of that year, it was 1999 at that time, and I got recruited, or recruiters calling me literally every day saying, "Hey, there's Silicon Valley, there's magic happening here. There's a gold rush. Come and join. And if you join, all you have to do is land up in Silicon Valley, and everyone becomes a millionaire." So that's how I started. I flew in. My sister used to live here, so I thought, okay, if they're paying me to fly in and a weekend and at a 5-star hotel, this was again my India training, free travel and getting to meet my sister. I just came in for the interview. I was no thought of leaving Freshfields, because that was my magic sort of position at that time.
Right.
I flew in, interviewed with a few firms on a Friday, stayed over the weekend. And over the weekend, I got to see what was happening in Silicon Valley, which at that time no one knew. There was this magic happening in this small place, wealth being created. Indians were at the forefront of that wealth creation. I got to meet Sabir Bhatia, ANIL ADVANI, some of the guys who had just sold companies, become angel investors.
It was hot then.
It was very hot, right? Very hot, and I had the opportunity of becoming, right, being part of that process. So I flew back that weekend. I went into my partner's office and said, I got an offer over the weekend. They moved really quickly. I got 3 offers, and I decided to go with Cooley Godward, again, a big firm and doing a lot of startup tech work in the Valley. I flew back in. I remember the first day back, and I told my partner, I'm going to I'm going to move to California. And he said, "What are you going to be doing?" I said, "I'll be working for startups." And he said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "I have no idea what a startup does, or what kind of law they would need, or a lawyer they would need. But I had decided that this is the place I want to be." And that's how I traveled and moved to Silicon Valley, Palo Alto in 1999, and then started in 2000.
Right. So you said when you started, you had a vague idea of success, but then even gradually you became more ambitious. I wanted to understand your idea of ambition, and is this something that you also inculcate to your daughter? How important is ambition for you, and has it played a role for you to push yourself harder in your life?
Yeah. And again, everyone has their own definition of ambition. Some have $1 million, some have now, I guess, $1 billion, because everyone's making $1 million. So everyone's now wants to be, every founder wants to create $1 billion company. Nobody talks about creating $1 million company. So I think the threshold, that there are dollar thresholds, and people have a way of measuring against that. My ambition has been developed over a period of time. As I said, I started off with a very vague ambition that I want to be successful. It wasn't about earning a lot of money. It was just successful in terms of, where I am in life,
Right.
and with people around me, right? In the sense that if my friends are able to create things or do things where they're happy with life, they're actually, progressing towards a goal, I want to be part of that process, right? So in college, for example, it was just working at a travel agency and being able to pay my own bills, to, getting to buy a car. Those were like financial goals. And I worked at British Airways, and I was able to afford to buy a car at that time, in early 20s, So those were ambitions. Throughout my life, and this is what I try to inculcate in my daughter, and I see that, it's working so far well, is that, there's like a loose sort of, in your mind, sense of being successful, which is driving you, or which drives you to do better, make yourself better, work harder. And when I say work hard, it just doesn't mean, just number of hours, but work smarter, right? Like, feel that you're growing as a person, as a professional. People are actually appreciating what you're doing. That's like the better. So, for me, the success, the measure of success is really where you are, right? I mean, successful people who have options, right? They can choose to work with anyone, are choosing to work with you. That's success. So So you grow in that path and say, okay, and push yourself, and that builds confidence in yourself that, hey, wait a minute, I'm as good a lawyer as anybody else, right? If people can hire that person, there's no reason they shouldn't hire me. Now it's my job to communicate that, make sure I'm developing my skills and learning and growing as a professional so that I can help my clients more. And that's growth to me, right? That's success to me. And by the way, once you do that, the financial success just follows that, right? I mean, you can't not be financially successful if you can do this on your own self, sort of growing as a professional on your own.
Got it. If I were to ask you, what were the pivotal moments or defining moments of your life that has shaped you, uh, what would you pick?
Yeah, again, not one, right? And it continues. Certainly, getting a job at Freshfields, because right before that time, we had no prospects, right? We literally were, at some point, had become starving. My parents would be offended because they were still funding, and they were still, financially. And my sister was in the US; she was paying our bills, but we were struggling financially, and we didn't even share that with our parents at that time. So from that to getting a job at a Magic Circle firm, and the first thing we did is we went to Georgetown, downtown, and went to one of the most expensive restaurants and celebrated by having a meal there, and being able to, instead of walking back home from downtown to where we lived in Roslyn, taking a taxi. That was a luxury for us. So that was a pivotal moment where, financially and in terms of success, we were at a point where we now could afford things. Certainly the birth of my daughter, you know that was pivotal, because that gave me both, again, confidence, and also very sort of, I think, to this, that transitions you suddenly without realizing it, and you look back and realize, from being a very carefree sort of young person to a suddenly have to be a responsible adult. So you have someone else that's going to be dependent on you for next 15, 20, 30 years, however long. And you can't just do what you want to do because you're floating around for the rest of your life, which is what I'd been doing before she was born. So I was always confident that I'll never starve, right? Because I had the skills, I had the education, and I was never ambitious that I had to make $1 million, $1 billion. So I was always floating in the sense of, if I like doing something, I enjoyed doing it, I wanted to do it without necessarily worrying about the financial. And I believe then, and I believe now, as I said, that if you do that, the financial rewards just come on their own. But the birth of my daughter resulted in becoming more sort of responsible, more sort of deliberate about what I was doing or going to do in life. That was certainly a pivotal moment. And then I think, in terms of my personal growth, starting my own law firm, having the guts to leave my job, and then starting my own, especially professionally, like a law firm, which is very controlled by some, especially in Silicon Valley. There's really 5 or 6 big law firms that have a lion's share of transaction work in Silicon Valley relating to startups, and deep relationship with investors, founders, angel networks. They have the resources to sponsor events, at that time. So being able to go against that and build sort of niche by niche, one brick by brick, or carving out one client at a time, that was certainly a pivotal moment in my career itself.
So, talking about personal growth, usually personal growth happens where we stretch beyond our existing limits and capacities and capabilities. So, you are saying starting Inventus Law was one such moment where it was bordering on this, it was stretching your limits, right? So,
Right.
and your confidence. Could you tell us a little more deeply on why and how did you start Inventus Law, and how was the entire process?
Yeah, again, it was somewhat of a plan, but mostly just being at the right time, right place, for the right reason. This was 2009, and the mortgage crisis had hit hard. Um, and a lot of my clients were, at that time, I used to work at a big firm, Auric Harrington, and my billing rates were pretty high. And even the associates that had to work for those clients, and it's just the way big firms are structured. So I had this. I was in a place where my clients, the early stage startups, they were not in a position to raise funding. Right? They started companies, they had technology, they had built a product, they were starting to get to a point where they would have started selling, but then the market collapsed, and therefore they were not selling, they were not raising revenues, they were not able to raise funding. The investment climate, as you may recall, collapsed as well. So they could not afford to pay my fees or my associates' fees. So I couldn't do the work for them. And I was left with a very sort of a very clear choice, that I could stay at my big firm and lose all my clients, and then the firm would have fired me, or I could decide to hold on to my clients and hope that they do well, so that I could sort of piggyback on their ride. And I decided that it was a very sort of a no-brainer at that time to follow my clients. A few of my friends had started companies, and frankly, one of my friends, Vikas, we were sitting at an event and we heard a lawyer talk about various things that they had been doing. A very successful lawyer at that time, not to be named. And Vikas looked at me and said, if this dude can do it, why can't you go and start your own firm? You do it. I will come in. I know 5 other people who are starting their businesses. With that small business set, already in place, that should give you enough confidence. And it was. And not to sound very cliche, but it's true. And cliches are generally true because they're based on real life experiences. But I saw the movie Guru, and it had come out at the same time, and that was inspirational. The life of Mukesh Bhai, his father, sorry, Dhirubhai. And there was a moment where he actually gets an offer. He's in Turkey. Abhishek Bachchan is in Turkey.
Yeah.
And he gets an offer from his employer at that time, which I think is promising him, if I recall. I haven't seen it for a while, but offers him a lot more money. And he comes in and he has a sidekick, and he says, he tears the letter up and like in drama 5, Abhishek fashion, throws it away. And the guy says, "What are you doing?" And he said, "अगर ये गोरा मेरी इतनी कीमत लगा सकता है, तो मुझे देखना है मेरी असली कीमत क्या है."
Nice.
I think that's something that all entrepreneurs can relate to, right? I mean, if you develop the skills, if you worked at any position for 5-7 years, you've developed the skill, you have the technology chops or the business chops. At that time, I really believe this. After 5 to 7 years, after that, you're wasting time. And I'm honest. I'm really I drink the Kool-Aid. I work with entrepreneurs, so maybe a little bias and take it with a grain of salt. But if you've been working with someone for 5-7 years, if you're at Google doing engineering, product, whatever it is you're doing, at that point, after that, there's very little growth, personal growth for you, right? You're following someone else's orders. Financially, maybe you get options, and you could always look back and say, if I'd done this and that, various things. I had an offer to join Google. I would have made a lot more money by now on the Google option. So I can always look back and say, financially, that was a better decision. But the personal growth, right? The ability to say that people will hire you because of who you are, right?
Yes.
People will join your team because of who you are, right? And even though you may be paying them less than what the other opportunities are, because they believe in what you're building,
Right.
Those will drive you to a higher sort of satisfaction and growth than working for any amount, any big or whatever corporation where they may pay you more. So that was certainly a pivotal moment in having the sort of the opportunity, and I was very thankful because I had friends who provide the opportunity. And really the lack of choice of losing my practice to jumping in, that made me shape sort of a lot of my personal skills that I would like to claim to have now.
Right. And how has the journey been ever since you started? Did you have hard times, or it has been a smooth flow since the beginning?
We always have hard times, right? Again, you pick your battles. You're always, as a startup founder, it doesn't matter. Mark Zuckerberg will testify to that. He's fighting in Australia right now. It's hard. If you ask him today, it's hard being an entrepreneur. It's always. I think your scale changes, right? And you start working with bigger companies. You get paid more, but it's always a challenge, right? Building a company, running it successfully, continue to grow it. Because clients always have an option. They can always go wherever, with other options. So building that, people that you hire, they have other options, right? They always have option to go somewhere else. So when you start, you start with the lowest, and then you sometimes, as the clients grew into, raising more money, they left, right? Or people that you trained very initially on, they got bigger offers and they left, and all for good reasons, right? So you sort of take it one at a time, right? So there's nothing definitive about when you start. So as a startup founder, if you're looking to start, that's the one skill you have to develop, is to have a lot of thick skin and not react to everything and not make it personal about you. Always, sometimes it's personal, and when it's personal, you go really hard, right? But not everything is personal. When people make decisions, they move, they don't work with you, employees leave, co-founders leave. It's usually because they have better opportunities, and maybe you would have done the same in that position. So you have to just understand, accept that, not personalize it, keep moving forward. So I would say it was hard. It's always hard to build something from scratch, especially in an industry like law, where the established players and people tend to be more conservative in hiring lawyers than they would in hiring somebody else. So building that reputation, building a source of founders that can actually recommend you, all of that was hard. It's still hard work and continues to be. But that's also the exciting part. It pushes you to continue to learn from your own successes, learn from your own mistakes, sometimes resolve not to make those mistakes again, resolve harder, and keep growing. That's the journey you're on as an entrepreneur.
What has been your biggest successes and biggest failures in this entrepreneurial journey?
I don't know. I mean, if there's any one particular moment, the success has been just being here. 11 years into it, and I think I'm here, still here, and I'd like to be able to say touch wood, still superstitious on that. I'd like to say that this is something I can see myself doing for the rest of my life. And I think that's a blessing, right? For people to be able to say that they're in a position where what they're doing today is something they can see themselves doing for the rest of their lives without a whole lot of changes to the way they do it. I think that's success, and that's a significant sort of achievement I would say I have personally, in that respect. Failure has been, I wouldn't say failure. I mean, there's no one particular failure. Failure has been sometimes in relationships with, personal relationships. Obviously, you look back and say, I wish I'd spent more time on my personal relationships. That's always the case, right? I mean, on hindsight, you can always look back and say, I wish I'd done this, done that. But there's not one specific failure that thankfully I can say I lost everything or made such a big mistake. I think not. I mean, losing some people that you work for because other law firms were able to pay them more, after having trained them from scratch. Those are failures in some respects.
Okay.
But other than that, not making investments in some companies that became, or some of my clients that became successful, it's just, again, part of life. You learn from that, and hopefully you do better in the future.
Right. What would you say are your personal superpowers that you think has been your advantage in your journey?
Yeah, so I think my self-belief, right? The ability to, the belief and confidence that I can actually do this, right? And you have to build that over time. If you just wake up in the middle of the day and say I can do it, all of that, you listen to all these power coaches and feel good about yourself, that's fine, but that's not a superpower. That's just sort of a delusional state of mind. I think the building on that one by one, proving to yourself, that. So I'm very proud to say, if you call me at 2 a.m. and ask me a legal question on startups, I will be able to answer that, or 4 a.m. If you are more asleep at 4 than 2, and then that, if that's your time of being in deep sleep. I like to think that if I go and meet the Queen, I've been watching the Queen, the Crown, so there's a little bit of that. But if you call me, the Queen calls me today and has me fly in and have lunch or dinner with her, I wouldn't be intimidated. I other than what to wear and having to wear a tie or something in my neck, maybe that personally would be a challenge. But other than that, how I sort of interact in that what I would expect very stressful situation.
Right.
I have confidence that I will be able to manage myself without embarrassing myself. So I think those kind of the internal growth is my superpower, the ability to be in any position and be able to hold my own, and be the confidence to be able to do things. If you put yourself against the best in the world, the ability to sort of hold yourself against that, that's really my superpower, my personal superpower, I would say.
So how do you stretch yourself? Do you set yourself ambitious goals every day? What is your goal setting process? How do you grow from one stage to another consciously? Do you believe in life goals, goal setting, maybe business, personal, everything?
Yes, you do. I mean, you have to, right? I mean, especially as you get older, you should start making. I think when you start your career, you don't want to set up too short goals, right? You set up longer goals and say, okay, in 10 years or 5 years, as the interview question says, where do you see yourself in 5 years? You have to answer that. 10 years, you have to answer that. And at least in my case, and I think it should be in many cases, unless you're going to be a doctor and you're so good at it and that's what you want to do, that's great. If you can do that, if you know that in your high school, dedicate yourself to being the best doctor, learning the best skills, knowledge that you can. But other than that, I think you set yourself goals very loosely when you start off, right? A loose goal of being successful. Sorry, I think I lost. Okay, here we go.
No,
The goal of being successful, the goal of working with, I mean, if you're a people person, maybe you set yourself a goal that I want to work with people. I want to look at industries, travel industry or hotel industry or financial services or real estate, where my people skills are going to be more important. If you're more analytical, then you'll set your goal of other things. If you explain things well, maybe you want to become a teacher. I mean, those are all good goals that you set yourself up. As you get older, as old as I am, you start thinking of setting goals to retirement, right? You say, okay, financially, what will I need? What do I need to build things around me so that worst case scenario, I'm still covered, to good and good case scenario, I can invest well so that I'm not being, as I've been very conservative in my investments. That's always a goal, right? Financial goal, to what happens next, right? So I'm setting the firm up with more senior lawyers. We hired 3 partners. We brought in 3 partners into the firm last year. So when everyone was being sort of compressing, I said, hey, this is a good opportunity to start building. And we actually, thankfully, again, we had 35% growth last year in our firm in terms of both revenues and the number of people we have. So that's the goal, that to keep building the firm, but with senior lawyers that can start taking over the functioning of the firm, the day-to-day operations, the day-to-day management in different parts, so that I can start focusing more on strategic items, both in terms of for my clients and my personal. So one of the things I've started is a separate company called Avatar, and Rajesh and I've talked about that. Where I help founders, entrepreneurs, with different things they need, right? Not just legal. So Inventus Law provides the legal services, and we have a very good team both in India and US now that can do that, but also more strategic sort of advisory, connecting to, and I'm talking to people all the time now. If there's an Indian entrepreneur or a Turkish entrepreneur or a Croatian entrepreneur that's coming into the Valley, they're building a business, setting up here, they need a connection to an angel investor or a VC, and mostly, a salesperson. They need to understand sort of where to set up an office. We provide all of that, from an office space to mailing services. My house, there are 2 rooms in my house that are available for founders to come in and out. So I'm starting to build more of that, the more relationships. I have a good lot of network in the last 21 years in the Valley, using that network to help founders that are coming in that may not have the same network, leveraging that, so that's certainly a goal for me, to build on Avatar services as a model, while continue to push very hard on growing Inventors and making sure that remains a good, viable sort of legal practice for everyone, including obviously myself involved here.
Got it. So you are also an investor. What sort of an investor are you? Are you early stage investor? Maybe a little bit of background on that would be helpful, on the sectors that you're investing and what stage of companies that you look for.
Yeah, so I am an early investor, and I have a very simple rule. If I invest in public markets, that's different. That's my personal investment. But other than that, in terms of startups, I have a simple rule. I only invest in my companies, right, in my clients. So I need to know the founders. And I have a unique advantage that most people don't realize, because when we are working with, as a lawyer, we are usually the point of first contact, right? We set up the company, so we get to see the founders' interaction. We get to see them talk about technology. My patent lawyer, Richard, he's great, and he talks to them, and he can call me and say, Anil, these guys are really kicking ass, as he says. So I have that input, right? If they're looking to hire, if they're talking to a big advisor who's coming in as an advisor, I get to see that first, because they call me in most cases to discuss how to bring that person in. If they have signing a contract, my partner Chris, he's working on the commercial agreement, so I have that data. So I have somewhat of an unfair advantage that I have all of these different bullet points before I make that decision to invest. And I always only invest in clients I'm working with that I know very well, and I believe that are building great things, and not in the short term, right? So I invest, and I tell my clients, I'm never selling unless you tell me to. If you tell me to sell at any time, I'll sell. But other than that, I just hold with the founders. I just take the ride with the founders.
So what do you mean by clients you're working with? Because these are new startups, right? So how can they be your clients?
So when they start a business, they become our clients, right? We help them incorporate the entity. We help them structure their founder agreements, filing their patents, structuring their agreements. So at that time, many times they are pre-funded, and that's always the challenge. You have to use your instincts that you build over time to figure out which is the right company is going to likely make it. And it's never accurate. You'll always miss some. You'll always make some wrong investments, but you learn in the process, right? Always.
Do you have preference of certain sectors, or any kind of startups is good for you?
No preference. Software generally, very broadly. I mean, having said that, I've also invested, and I invested my own money in health, and food tech. So not software, but a real food company, and because I believe in the mission, right? I mean, so I'm very excited about them, and but mostly software. There's no specific sector as such, but if they're doing cool stuff, building a nice business, obviously the key is the founders. They have to be 100% committed, right? They can't be part-time. It doesn't make sense for anyone, for any founder to be going and saying, hey, put your hard-earned money into my business where I don't believe enough that I'm actually working somewhere else to earn money. So I think that's a misconception, that unless again you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're starting a company, people will pour money in. If you're a first-time entrepreneur, you have to believe in it, and you have to demonstrate your belief that you're going to give up all your other opportunities to build this. And that's the only way you can attract the right. You might be able to get your friends, family, but the right investors who would invest because of what they believe you can do personally. So I always look at that, right? But there's no specific industry focus as such.
But
I'm not
how?
an expert in anything, right? I'm not an expert in any part of technology, so I have no way of evaluating that in any form.
No. The reason I asked is some investors usually have some sectors because
Right.
either they're familiar with it or not.
Right.
But thanks, you answered that. But how do you test commitment of a founder? Like, what's the litmus test for that? How do you test that?
Yeah. So firstly, obviously, as I said, they have to be full time. Uh, it's not just the founder; it's also who they have been able to bring in, right? A lot of times, Pejman Nozad is a friend of mine, and he was one of the early investors in a lot of successful companies, DoorDash being one of them,
Yeah.
most recently. And he has a great way of, asking that question. He says, hey, to the founders, if two founders come in, he says, how did you meet each other? He always asks that story because that gives you a lot of background on how they got together, right? So if they've been classmates at IIT or any engineering college, that's a good sort of sign that the two of them, with again all these the option of co-founding with 100 other IIT alumni, they decide to work with each other because founders know each other better than anyone else would know. It's like being married to each other, right? So behind closed doors, husband and wife know what the husband and how fearful or strong that husband is and wife is, and they know the reactions, right? They share more than any they would share with anybody else, including their parents in most cases. So founders similarly on a work situation, two or three founders, he or she, they know each other better than anybody else can ever know, right? So how they respect each other, how they talk about each other, the fact that they're committed to each other is a very good sign for investors to look into, right? That with all the knowledge, all the information about the other, they've chosen to give up everything else and trust that other co-founder. So there's enough built in to, sort of go along for that ride.
Got it. And what other parameters other than good founder commitment?
Well, of course, angels, so again, I'm the dumb lawyer here, right? So I'm not the one that can evaluate technology necessarily. I look at who are the other people who are investing, possibly the other angels, the success record, or as I said in this food tech company, the fact they're looking to change the way food is processed and eaten, and we all can deal with that. It's going to be good for our children if someone can come up with better food technologies that are more also good for environment. So those are the ones kind of companies that I get very excited about, right? I mean, there's the wealth creation or the investment for creating wealth, and there's this investment for good companies with good goal and mission, which are also, again, you have to validate them as investments. Otherwise, if they're not good investable companies, they will die and it doesn't serve anyone. But those are the two parameters I would look at.
And
Who
how
else
do you measure?
business and what is their mission as such?
Got it. And how do you measure the success of a startup that you have invested? Like, do they have to reach a certain scale? Is that the metric for success, or how do you rate the success of a good startup?
So, there are two parts, right? One is as a law firm or lawyer representing a part of the law firm that's representing. I always joke about this, but it's true. And any professional will tell you that as long as they're able to pay my bills, I think they're successful, right? I mean, so that's the lowest common sort of denominator for success as far as professors are concerned. Personally, it's really and this is again cliche, but it's based on, again, working with all these entrepreneurs, how much you learn from them, right? I mean, um, obviously the investment part of it and who's involved. As I was saying earlier, I invested very early stage. So if they raise their Series A, their Series B, my investment's already valued, right? So I'm happy with that. Then it's a matter of how much more value there should be. And sometimes I sell early if the founders want me to, because they want to, investors want more equity coming in, or I hold on and I just sort of don't even look at those investments for until they ripen. Uh, but I think it's like right now I have a co-founder staying with me in my house. They founded a company called Pixel, and these are 23-year-olds, two founders from Bits Pilani, 23-year-old. I actually started working with them when they were 21, right? So, and they're creating basically a space technology. They've actually built a rocket, and they plan to build series of rockets that will be launched with and they've raised money from very successful entrepreneurs. They were incubated with NASA. So when he's Awais was here in my house earlier. Kshitij, the other co-founders, he's staying here. The conversations I have with them, right, understanding sort of what they're doing, obviously the passion, the hard work, which all entrepreneurs, I should say, have. But the fact, again, I see that, as 23-year-olds, they're looking to change the world. They're going in an industry that's very difficult to get into. Being a rocket scientist, building your own rockets, competing against the best, that is exciting, right? So to be able to back that. So what you do is you make a lot of investments and you put a lot of your time into the typical day-to-day software companies because they pay your bills, and then a small portion you want to bet on the big guys, the big sort of high risk, high reward sort of opportunities, where if they do it, and I've no doubt they will, whether they do it now in 6 months, 12 months, but if and when they do it, it'll be very exciting to be able to say I was one of the first ones, to be part of this successful company. So looking at the stories that you build that you can share in the future, the knowledge that you get, the enjoyment of working with entrepreneurs who've got this crazy big dreams, all of that very personally very satisfying.
Right. How do you validate the power of an idea? Like, for example, this rocket venture. Rocket venture is actually a rocket venture in Europe.
Right.
I'm not talking about that one, but the one that you just mentioned. How do you measure? Because when an idea is new, it's just the power of the idea, right? But do you have certain filter to validate that this is worth pursuing?
Yeah. So again, I'm usually piggybacking on other people, right? So they've done that. But again, I've done enough, and I've worked with enough VCs and investors that I would say, what you want to do is ask questions, right? You can just, a lot of investors come in, and a lot of founders expect that investors will come in with knowledge about things that they can help, right? And suddenly the light bulb will switch on. It should not happen. It doesn't happen like that. It should not happen like that, right? Founders have to always have the best information, the best plans available. They should be looking at people they work with to validate that. And similarly, investors coming in should not be coming in and saying, hey, we know what you are doing, and let me tell you how to do it, or let me validate this idea in my manner, right? The best we can do as investors is really ask the questions, right? Make sure, and you look in the eyes of the founders, and again, another cliche, but you look at them and ask the tough questions, see how they respond, right? If they haven't thought about some of the basics, it doesn't matter how good they are, right? If they haven't thought about the basics, who will you sell to, right? Have you talked to these, and who's your competitor? If they don't have those basic that basic information flushed out, the first question you have to be able to ask in whatever form you ask, and the answer you need to get as a founder, as an investor investing in founders, is why the heck are you doing this, right? Are you looking to? Is there a market opportunity? Are you doing something that's not been done before? Are you doing something that's different from what? Is there someone going to pay you more money than they're paying somebody else to do this, right? Those are at the end of the day, you're saying, why are you leaving your job at Google? What is the driver for this? And as long as the founders have thought about it, they can answer that question successfully. You sort of lead, that's the instinct that you go with at that time.
Right. So for a startup, there are often growth challenges, right? Because a lot of them stay at the bottom of the pyramid. There are only a few who can actually scale to become unicorns. What do you think? Have you seen a pattern for all startups that cannot grow beyond a point?
Almost always, it's personal, right? The founders can look around and I don't want to be sounding harsh, and I have a lot of respect for, as being an entrepreneur founder myself and working with all. I have a lot of respect for founders, but I think any founder that's listening should look at themselves. If they're not successful, they should look at themselves instead of anybody else, right? I mean, in this market, especially if you have, and again, I'm talking about technology, right? Only tech. If you have a tech startup uh, and you're struggling, you have to look at yourself. You really have to say, why am I not able to attract the right talent to work with me? Because that will make you successful. Why am I not able to get the right technology, right? If you don't have that, why is it that my engineers are not able to deliver? What am I missing in this process? Why are my customers not buying, right? And why are investors not investing? Because believe it or not, it's happening to hundreds and thousands of others, right? They are building technologies that are working. There is a huge demand for whatever you build at this time. Again, I'm saying that with a very broad brush, and I don't want to exaggerate, but if you are a technology startup, you understand technology as a founder. If you're an engineer or whatever you've done, you understand product, or you're a business person, and as a CEO you've started a company and you have the right people working for you, and it's still not scaling to a point where you're not able to raise money or work and get customers, it's you. There's something that you are doing that you need to change right away to be able to get the right people to work for you, get them committed. Sometimes founders hold on to equity too much, right? They just think of the early people that are taking the same risk. They're not fair to them, right? And you don't get people to stay like that. And I've learned from my own personal experience, right? So you have to be able to share equity with the right people so that you can attract the right people. You have to be able to work really hard yourself. Ask those, again, the tough questions of your engineers. Make sure it's working. You have to be fully involved in the process.
Got it. I'm being mindful of the time here. Just last question, and I read a very nice article that you wrote on VentureBeat about 6 things US entrepreneurs can learn from Indian entrepreneurs. So you have a very strong connection in the Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? I mean, you are very active there, I suppose. And
Ravi,
Anil, are you there? Hello. Anil, are you there? So I think we lost Anil, but that's fine. So the last question that I had for Anil was, and I'll share that in the link in the description below. So I asked him about his very insightful article that he wrote on VentureBeat about 6 things American entrepreneurs can learn from Indian entrepreneurs. And the first one was Jugaad, no MVP, agility in claiming secondary markets, and anti-stealth. And I wanted to ask him about no MVP and anti-stealth, but that's perfectly fine. Oh, he's back. He's back.
sorry about that. I guess we lost internet.
Hey, no, I was just about to drop off as well, but thanks for the reason I asked you is I read your very insightful article on VentureBeat on how American entrepreneurs can learn from Indian entrepreneurs, and you gave 6 reasons. First of all, my question is, you are very bullish, and you strongly you're very active in Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? What is the reason? And yeah, so is this your connection with your country, or what is that natural instinct that you're so active in Indian entrepreneurial ecosystem?
Yeah, in fact, I've been involved in the India-US corridor for the last 21 years. Can you hear me now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Totally.
Yeah. So one of our clients, when I used to work in early 2000, it was 2001 or some, Norwest Ventures had invested in Persistent, which was way back in. That was one of the earliest US VC investments into at that time, a very nascent sort of early stage Indian company, Persistent Software. So I've been involved from that time. So there was this business opportunity. I always saw that and everyone knows this, the India, US, democracies, culture,
Yeah.
technologies, there's so many sort of
Online.
synergies between them. Yeah, there was always an opportunity, and India kept shooting itself in the foot because there's always this regulation, that regulation, this restriction. It came in and out, so people lost interest, right? But I continued. Uh, but on a professional level, I was at Cooley. I was the one Indian lawyer, so I was the India head of India practice. At Auric, I was head of the India sort of global practice,
Right.
just by default, and because I raised my hand to do it. So there's always the opportunity, in the last 10 years, and I got very fortunate, and this is where complete fortune. When I started Inventus, my own law firm, it was again with a very vague idea that I also want to be able to do a lot more work with Indian entrepreneurs, being able to spend more time in India. Because at a big firm, you can't do that. You have to, justify every hour you're spending because someone's paying for it.
Right.
If you're paying for it yourself, then you can do that. So in early 2009, from there on, I also had worked with entrepreneurs in the Valley that had moved back to Bangalore and starting companies. So I started connecting with them, sharing ideas. From that to, the growth has been pretty amazing. And I'm absolutely delighted because I used to say this when I started in 2009, 2010. I remember I saying it to one of the first entrepreneurs I started, Vivek Ravi Shankar from Hacker Rank. I told him that I would love to be driving down on 101 and see billboards instead of Intel. At that time, Intel was still a big company, believe it or not. Instead of seeing Intel and all, I want to see Indian companies billboard, right? So, and in the top 10, there should be some Indian companies. So people, when they're buying a product, when they're buying a device or buying software, they look at Indian. They know it's an Indian company, and they actually want to pay more for it and buy more of that, right? And that was again a very loose dream and idea. I would say still not come to fruition, right? I mean, it's still not mainstream. The products and the technologies created in India are still not mainstream. I'm very excited about where we are, right? In the India-US corridor, the Indian market itself is growing significantly, and there's lots of opportunities. But yes, it's very personal to me, to be able to say, again, be in any part of the world and say, that's an Indian company, I'm Indian, so if that's me, I can do that. Or someone like me can do that, so to get the confidence of the customer that you come from a place where they build these great companies, these great technologies. That's what being an American has been through my life, right? I mean, if as an American, Americans would go to any part of the world, and if they said they were American, they got a lot of respect because they may not have done anything, but companies that, represented America, even Nikes, the chewing gum Wrigley's, I remember growing up, Wrigley's was such a great product, you thought this was best. I mean, Americans are so good. So if I met an American, I would think of American not as the person, but someone who comes from a country that make Wrigley's chewing gums. So being able to relate to that as an Indian traveling, and I used to travel a lot growing up, and I still enjoy traveling and meeting people in any part of the world and being able to say, I grew up in India, I'm an Indian, and for them to say, yeah, I use this Indian company or this product made in India, being able to relate to that is very exciting.
Thank you. My last closing question here is, what would be your recommendation to somebody who is, say, his mid-30s, still in his job and still wondering whether or not to take a plunge into entrepreneurship? Do you recommend entrepreneurship to everybody, or do you think that only certain kind of people should take this path?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I don't think there is any certain kind of people, right? I think anyone can be molded into being an entrepreneur. That's really up to you. The short answer, and I'll explain, so but depending on how much time. The short answer is everyone should be an entrepreneur.
Everybody should be an entrepreneur, is what you feel.
Everyone should be an entrepreneur, but they have to be careful, right? They have to know two things. One, they have to have a unique skill, right? Whatever it is, they could be an accountant, they could be a lawyer, they could be obviously technology, they could be a chef, right? Whatever it is, they have to have a skill that they've developed with someone that knows what they're doing for a good 5 to 7 years, right? So if you're in the 30s, mid 30s, that's you, right? You need to have that, and you need to know that it's not going to be easy, right? It's when you leave, you will not have someone to turn to. You will not say, if the computer's not working, you can't just pick up the phone and say, hey, IT, come and fix my computer. Or if someone leaves, it's not something that you have to find someone to replace that person to do the work, right? So if you're a chef, you walk into a restaurant, somebody leaves, you go to the owner and say, get me someone to work for. If you're a chef and you start your own restaurant, you can't do that. If there's no dishwasher coming in that day, you are the dishwasher, right? So if you're going to start, anyone can be successful with that skill set, having worked and honed their skills with someone, with experience, but with that attitude that if the dishwasher doesn't show up, you're going to be that dishwasher that day and not wait for somebody else, right? That's, if you have those two skills, anyone can be and should be an entrepreneur.
Cool. This brings us to the end of an very insightful conversation with Anil. Thank you, Anil. I for accepting my request. We have never spoken before, but I dropped you a random Facebook Messenger message, and thank you for responding to that and making this possible. I'm sure a lot of my audience would find a lot of value with this. Very, very thought-provoking and drawn from your rich life experiences. How are you planning your next 10 years? Do you have ambitious goals, or you are winding down your energy and you're going conservative?
Both. So I have ambitious goals over the next 10 years so that I can then look to wind down and start, the next phase of my life, as they say. I think one thing I've learned is that, being conservative is good, but being overly conservative, you miss opportunities, and when you miss those opportunities, they don't come back, right? So in the life, regrets are always the opportunities, as they say, again, cliche, but the opportunities that you missed are the ones that you regret, right? So go faster, go deeper, go harder is all I would say. And really, you have nothing to lose. Whatever you lose, the fact that you did it, the experience you learn from it, will get you to be faster and bigger and learn faster and grow, even if you miss those opportunities. But if you don't take those, you're not learning, you're not growing.
Thank you, Anil. Thanks again for all those wise words. See you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ravi. Bye.